I'm out here on Lake Tahoe today, West Lake Tahoe that is. Got a few hours to fish. Wanted to head down to Kenansville because I saw that place kind of turned back on and it's my favorite lake. But didn't have the time to go down there where I could actually put in the time to kind of go around the entire area and figure out where the fish are. So I'm up here fishing the north end of Lake Tahoe today. Now, one thing that I kind of want to talk about, I think it's kind of on everybody else's mind down here in Florida, a lot of the kayakers at least that I know, is aquatic plant management. Now, understand this is based on my research and my own opinion, and to at least give myself a little bit of credibility, before I actually got started in music, I wanted to be an ichthyologist with a specialization in studying like freshwater marine habitats. That's what I wanted to do, and that's until I found music and sold my soul to that and went down that path. So when it comes to how to treat the hydrilla problem or just the vegetation problem here in Florida overall, it's a really touchy subject, especially if you get onto some Facebook groups like the Fellsmere reservoir group. There's a lot of discussion and debate about what should be done about that place, because in March it's going to open up to boaters. It's not going to be a kayak haven anymore. If you want to fish it by boat, you can, and rightfully so. It's paid for and managed by taxpayers' money, so it should be open to everybody. Now I know that's kind of sucks for people like me who fish out of kayak, and I just found that place last year and was really enjoying it, and there's some monster fish in there. But it is what it is, and that's the way it's going to be, and it's only fair. So I've seen a lot of people that they get angry about all the spraying that goes on here in Florida. I get it. And I think that's a mismanagement on the state's part by just not really telling people what to spray or just minimizing it, but just telling them, hey, go spray this lake. Because I saw it in Kenansville. And when the waters got high at the end of the summer, that lake for me just completely shut off. And I miss fishing that place where I could, my best bag out of there was probably 30 pounds, 2 8-pounders, a 6, and multiple 4s and a 5 or 2. It's a fantastic place to fish. Same thing with Fellsmere. But to be honest, I think that it was mismanaged in spraying. The state came out and they sprayed Fellsmere too. And what sucked about that was after about the same time that Kenansville turned off, Fellsmere also shut off for a little bit. Now it's since recovered and it looks like both lakes are producing big fish again. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is I don't think we can get rid of spraying completely. I don't think that's going to solve a lot of the issues of navigation, of being able to find navigable paths for boats and boats and kayaks. Get down there. There you go. I don't think that's going to solve the problem. A lot of people have pointed to using mechanical harvesters. I'm going to put a picture of one on the screen if you don't know what I'm talking about. So this is a mechanical harvester. And while they're really useful for many different applications, they also have a lot of pitfalls that people don't consider whenever they're saying, hey, we should do this instead of spraying. Mechanical harvesters are absolutely fine to use. But one, they don't make these machines in mass. These things are custom made per order. So you'd have to convince the state to spend just a boatload of money. Oh, I had a bite. I had a bite on a pitch. You have to convince the state to spend just an absolute boatload of money on one of these machines or a fleet of these machines. Most of the mechanical harvesters, at least that I've seen, they're contracted. There's some type of company that owns them or owns a few of them. They come in and they do like a Lake Tahoe here or whatever other lakes there are, purely based on a contractual basis. I'm not saying the state shouldn't own a few. In fact, I think in my opinion, it has to be a combination of both spraying and that. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But some of the downfalls to mechanical harvesting, even though you go and let's say you cut off all the hydrilla that is covering both West Lake Tahoe or Fellsmere or even Kenansville during the summer months, it's going to grow back in a month or two because hydrilla grows at a rate of about 2 to up to I think it's 1 to 5 inches per day depending on the height of the season, whatnot. That's a lot. That's a lot. The thing that is going to limit that is, even though, Fellsmere is huge, so let's say they go and they just cut all of that out, right? And make it completely navigable by boat or whatever you have, right? Let's just say they do that. I don't see, first, you would have to have a fleet. Oh, I'll tangle it up here. You would have to have a fleet of those things to do it. An entire fleet of them. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. There's absolutely no way that you're going to be able to keep up with it. That Hydrilla would be back up where it is as soon as they finish cutting that thing. Unless you had multiple going. On top of that, they don't get rid of Hydrilla. They might make it easier to navigate for a short amount of time, but to be honest, they also spread it. A mechanical harvester is not going to pick up 100% of everything that it cuts up. It's going to get scattered. So Hydrilla is still going to be there no matter what. I get it. Hydrilla is an invasive species. It can cause a lot of pains. I've lost some big fish in Hydrilla, but it's also really kind of good for the fish if it's in the right balance. So mechanical harvester is not going to solve some of those problems, and I don't think they should focus on mechanically harvesting all of Fellsmere. I think if they're going to do it, they should manage the channels and anywhere where it becomes super matted, where it's not going to be beneficial to us or the fish themselves. Mechanical harvesters themselves, besides the cost, it's expensive to dispose of the plant life that it picks up. You have to pay for that too, so you have to convince the state that we're going to have to pay for that. Either we're going to pay more in taxes, or we're going to find the money somewhere. Easiest way to get rid of all that stuff is really just to dump it on the shoreline. They did this in Orange Lake in the 70s, and unless you want, the lines or the shorelines of probably the West Canal, I'd say. That's good fish. Unless you want the shorelines of the west shorelines of Fellsmere just to be absolutely slathered in I gotta pull the anchor. Sorry guys, give me a second. I don't want to lose this fish. Unless you want it slathered in dead, rotting material, you're gonna have to find some way to dispose of it, and that's expensive. I think he's still on there. I can feel him. He's still on there. So keep that in mind. Honestly, the solution is probably going to be a compromise of the two. Planned spraying mixed in with here, bud. Planned spraying mixed in with planned harvesting. It's a good fish. It's been a while since I've had a decent fish on. It's not huge. It's what, maybe 2.5 pounds? But it's been a while. All right, peace. I know it's not going to be the popular opinion for me to say I don't want them to necessarily get rid of spraying altogether. I think we need it, but I think in many cases, like the case of Keenansville last year, where they could have just had a mechanical harvester go down and clear out the canals so that we could still get down through there, I think that would have been much more suitable than spraying the entire lake. Or they could have sprayed the parts that were like overly thick and then brought a mechanical harvester when that stuff starts to die, get it up out of there so it doesn't decay and mess up and dirty up the water. They could have done that. I think it's going to be a balance between the two. I know that might be the unpopular opinion, but I don't think mechanical harvesting, from a cost standpoint, and from the standpoint that it's not really, not necessarily going to solve the problems that we have, I don't think that's a solution completely. I think it's going to have to be a combination of both. There are a couple things that I think people kind of overlook when discussing this stuff, and one of it is, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but one of them is biomass. I live out here by West Lake Toho and East Lake Toho, Fish Lake, and I can get on all three within a couple of minutes. I love these lakes. These lakes are fun to fish. They hold monster fish if you know where to look, but they are completely different in many aspects. If you look at the biomass in East Lake Toho, East Lake Toho is a nice lake. The water clarity is phenomenal. However, East Lake Toho, it has a much lower biomass. There isn't as much life out there. If you're gonna find fish, they're almost always gonna be up along the shoreline in the weeded areas. With the exception of the few rock piles that exist outside of the, out in the middle, that's where the fish are gonna be at. There's not a lot of offshore grass. What very little there is, if you can find some, you know, they usually produce a couple fish off of it. East Lake Toho has some big fish in it, but the amount of big fish versus the amount of big fish on West Lake Toho is substantially different. And West Lake Toho has a hydrilla problem. But that hydrilla and the fact that there are so many vital sources of food that bass rely on that live in that hydrilla, you know, that's why there's such a quality and fish difference. It's the same thing for Fellsmere. Fellsmere, if you've ever gone out in a kayak over top of any of the, come off that, get a new bug on here. If you've gone over top of any of the hydrilla at any point and just looked at all the fish that jump when you paddle out there, it's astonishing. It's a ridiculous amount of fish. There's so many bait fish out there. There's so many gar, there's so many tilapia, there's so many bass. No wonder that place has such big fish. You know, it's because of the biomass out there that can support these larger fish, or the giant amount of fish in there. I mean, the state stocked 1 million plus the ones that were already there. So it's got over 1 million fish in it. If you were to entirely spread that off or cut off a lot of the hydrilla or whatever, you know, other plant life is out there, like the hyacinth at Kenansville. One of the other downfalls to mechanically harvesting that stuff is it can harvest up to 30% of the smaller life forms that are essential for large bass populations. If you do the entire lake, up to 30% of those life forms or those species are removed. 30% in terms of their population. That is a big chunk. Imagine if you took your entire fridge and you took out a third of the food. Now, where it's easy for us to go back and get more food from, like, you know, Walmart, Publix, wherever, for the bass, they have to wait for that food to reproduce again. And 30% is a huge chunk that would significantly slow down or, you know, possibly diminish the quality of fish or the quality of fishing that's there. The same thing if you do that here in West Lake Toho. Again, I think it's going to be a combination of both spraying and managing navigable areas by mechanical harvesting that's going to be the answer. And I waited so long to kind of to put this out there. I wanted to make sure I had my research down, but that's what's important to me. I want to have good fisheries that are accessible to me, to the public and my viewers, and I want these fisheries to be there for as long as possible. You know, when Kenansville turned off for me, it was a huge bummer. Going out there one day catching 2 8s and a 6 and a bunch of 4s and 5s was amazing. And then coming back and realizing that I couldn't even catch one fish or a fish over 16 inches, it was kind of devastating. It was like, what happened? And a lot of people complain about stick marsh. The fish is completely different than it did. It used to be like it is now, and then then when it got a lot of pressure, it changed a little bit, and I think then the grass and stuff grew up and they oversprayed it. So maybe it's not knocking out the numbers that it used to all the time, but the fish are still there for the most part. It would be a shame if the state went one way or the other, and I know they're asking for input. So if you're really invested in that and you're going to the meetings and stuff, if you have time to do that, you know, bring up these points or bring up your concerns, but make sure that you do a lot of research on it. The last thing we want to do is think that we're doing something good for an area and end up ruining it anyway. That's just my 2 cents on it. And I'm trying to base this as much of the research that I've done. Thought I had one there. But this is my experience with it. And I know that, you know, certain parts of the country use mechanical harvesting and not spraying. It works well for them, but they're not. They aren't Florida. We have a unique fishery down here. We have unique problems, and I think we have to think of all angles if we're going to, you know, continue to have the amazing fisheries that we do. All right, but that's my 2 cents on it. You don't have to agree with me. It's, you know, that's just how I feel about it, and the thing that I think needs to be done for places like Fellsmere to survive and be viable for everybody. And speaking of that, if you're watching this and you fish Fellsmere, I wouldn't mind if they, you know, limited paddlecraft and electric motors to the north end and left the other end completely open. You'd bass fishermen, you'll be able to get down to the south end much faster than any kayak guy, and it hasn't been touched yet. I know some people have gone down in there, but we'll keep that hush hush. So for you guys, you know, the whole south end is pretty much your playground, and I think during hunting season for duck season, the north end again should be closed off to motors, just electric motors, paddlecraft like that for the duck hunters and the kayak fishermen, and then for those 2 months when it's over, then go back to, you know, let whoever out. I mean, there's solutions to everything. You got to be willing to work together and compromise on a few things.